Welcome to From the Honeycomb podcast. I am your host, Katerina and Join me as we explore stories of fearless female entrepreneurs and inspiring women in architecture, construction, engineering, and beyond. Each episode is a captivating blend of topics that resonate with the soul. Whether you're here to learn more about entrepreneurship, architecture, holistic living, or just need a little extra inspiration, you've come to the right place. So sit back, relax, and let the buzz of positive energy spark your curiosity. Welcome to the first episode of the Woman in Architecture series. This year's theme focuses on the power of collaboration within the profession. To kick off the series, I am joined by Janiece Williams, the co-founder and executive director of LeaderFlow. With over a decade of experience in architecture, Janiece is dedicated to enhancing the journey for emerging professionals in the industry. In 2022, she co-founded LeaderFlow, a nonprofit accelerating the leadership pipeline for professionals of color in the AEC industry. Janiece, welcome to From the Honeycomb, and thank you so much for being a part of the Woman in Architecture series this year.
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you. And as you know, we begin every episode by sharing something that we are grateful for in the present moment. So what are you grateful for?
You know what? That's such a great question. And it's something that, I feel like has been at my core of just practicing gratitude and something that's really important for me. And so sometimes we need those reminders that even if, the chaos of the day kind of gets in the way, you sometimes need to just pause and reflect on those moments of gratitude. And for me, I had a really incredible moment with my grandmother on my father's side. I was blessed to have two grandmothers who lived beyond 100. And
Wow.
my grandmother on my father's side is still living, and she's 102 and thriving and is probably going to outlive all of us. But I took her to her first Broadway show yesterday, and we went to see The Lion King. And
Oh my
she was
gosh.
so excited to see it. And she looked like such a little kid full of joy, just enjoying watching The Lion King. And seeing her smile and laugh and enjoy that moment was something that made me extremely happy. And so I was kind of relishing in that moment today. So that is definitely something I'm extremely grateful for, is being able to give her that opportunity to see something as beautiful as that.
Oh my gosh, and what a show to see. That is like one of the top show.
I
It's
know.
amazing. So, oh my gosh, what a great choice for
Yes.
her as well.
Yes, it was great. And it was the last show in Houston. And I had been traveling a lot for work. And I was a little bummed because I thought I was going to miss out on the opportunity to catch some tickets. And thankfully, I scored some last minute tickets for a really reasonable price. So I took advantage and we went last minute, and it was great.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really special for sure. For
Very much
sure.
so.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you for asking. Can I ask you the
Yeah.
same?
Oh man. Ooh, in the present moment, it's something I've been reflecting on a lot is I'm really grateful for the strength that my body has given me recently. I think there's been just a lot personally going on, and I haven't been physically like the strongest, and I've kind of been, getting back to like training and doing yoga and hiking, and I have a 38 and a half mile 3-day hiking trip coming up in 2 weeks. So
Wow.
I'm like getting ready for that. And we did a practice 6-mile hike yesterday with my husband just to like see, am I in the right condition? And, I did it and my body feels really good today. And so I just feel like really grateful for like the strength that my body has in order for me to be able to do all of these activities that I love to do. Like I also went to yoga this morning, and like I'm just so grateful that I have like my health, especially.
That is amazing, and something that definitely, warrants moments like this, because it
Mhm.
is not easy. And realizing that, as we are getting older and, we're still being bombarded with so many things that we're responsible for day to day, it just feels harder to, kind of put that time and energy in yourself like that. And so
Mhm.
that's inspiring. Like, I
Oh,
went
thank
to the
you.
gym today for the first time in like maybe a week and a half. And I was like, okay, I'm going to just start off with a little bit just to get my body
Mhm.
moving, and let's just go from there. But kudos to you. That's amazing. That hike is going to
Thank
be
you.
incredible. I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous. I've never done where like it's off of Catalina Island, so off the coast
Yeah.
of Orange County. So we are packing everything in. I'm excited. I'm a little nervous. I've never done anything like it. And like I've done daily hikes or like 2 day hikes, but I'm wondering how day 3 and 4 are gonna be. So that's why
Sure.
I'm getting ready for that.
Yeah, what an adventure to come, though. That's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
Thank
see,
you.
I'm cheering you on.
Thank you, and thanks for asking too. I appreciate it. Hi, it's me, Katerina. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to share with you something that can change the trajectory of your life. If you are ready to start your own architecture firm but are feeling overwhelmed by where to begin, I understand, because I felt the same way when I first embarked on my entrepreneurial journey. This is why I have created the ebook, The Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm. This comprehensive workbook contains everything I wish I had known before starting my own firm. From building a solid business plan to creating your brand, the Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm offers a step-by-step guide tailored to your timeline, whether you're launching your firm today, next month, or in a few years. Dive into essential topics like financial planning, organization strategies, and how to secure your first client, all in one convenient resource. That's right, you don't have to spend hours researching. I have done that for you so you can focus on building your business. And that's not all. With your purchase, you'll also receive an exclusive meditation for business owners, mindfulness tips, a crystal guide for support, and gratitude exercises to help you stay focused and positive throughout your journey. Turn your dream of having your own firm into a reality with the Mindful Blueprint for Launching Your Architecture Firm. Click on the link in the show notes to get your copy today. Now, let's dive into the episode. So, Janiece, share with us your architectural journey. What has brought you into the world of architecture and just, your journey there?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think just to kind of set the stage for this, full transparency, I sort of struggled with my identity in architecture for a while because I was introduced to the profession sort of just like in a space where I was trying to discover what I wanted to do in college and what I was going to major in. But it was never this moment of me like always knowing that I wanted to be an architect and study architecture. And so I went to a high school that was sort of like a magnet school for like the health professions. And it was a very intense environment to be in, but it really prepared me for college. And I mean, we did all sorts of rotations in the hospitals, and I thought I wanted to go into medicine. And I quickly realized that that was probably not the thing that I probably should be doing. It was just hard to kind of be in those environments as being sort of an empath. And so I began this journey of like, okay, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to major in? I want to be able to help people. I want to be of service. Like, maybe I could explore some creative sides to, my interest. And my sister is actually who introduced the idea of architecture to me. And she had a long career in construction management. And she said, well, have you ever thought about architecture? I was like, no, I mean, I know what it is, but I don't really know if this is
Mhm.
what I'd be interested in. So she took me around to a few firms at the time. I think this might have been my junior, or senior year. And everyone was telling me, don't do it. And I was like, okay, that's not really the warm welcome that I was hoping
Mhm.
for, but something just, I guess convinced me to try it. And I think the other thing that gave me a little bit of comfort in the decision was my sister explaining to me, like, it's college, you can try different things. If it doesn't work out, try something else. And I said, okay, well, that's the commitment that I can make to myself. So I applied to architecture school at Howard University and I got accepted. And I remember being in that first year studio, that first day of class, and we were in this interesting conference room space, which was unique. We were sitting around this table, and I will always kind of visually remember this moment, but had a female professor, and she was very, just kind of had this like super strong presence to her. And I was like, oh, okay, she looks kind of like a, boss. Like she's really coming in with this like assertiveness. And I need to listen to what she has to say and like be ready to engage in this. And she told us to like look to our left and look to our right. And she guaranteed that we probably weren't going to be crossing the stage with the person sitting next to us in 5 years. And I was like, okay, what am I getting myself into? Now, this is the second time that someone has told me, some type of super intimidating thing about this industry. And, I'm not really sure what to do with that information. So, fast forward, I think during my schooling, I suffered through a lot of imposter syndrome at the time because I wasn't really identifying with sort of the passion that my fellow students exhibited towards the industry and their connection to it and their desire to be licensed and maybe own their own firms. And, for me, I think what really attracted me to the profession was somehow trying to merge my connection and dedication to community through the built environment and through design. So, how can I impact my community? How can I shape my community and add to the fabric of my community through design? And so, through college, struggled a lot because I didn't know anything. I think the one thing I maybe knew how to do was read a scale because my sister taught me how to read a scale before I
Mhm.
showed up the first day, but self taught on everything else in terms of learning how to use computer programs and everything. But the one thing that I really appreciated about my collegiate experience was the sort of family environment that was created. And I think that's maybe something that many architects can sort of relate to is that in school, we do have this, shared community and trying to help each other like get across the finish line and not
Mhm.
leave anyone behind. And so the way that my peers really showed up for me and advocated for me, they wouldn't let me get too bogged down or, they would offer any type of support. And I think that to me is what kept me in it and kept
Mhm.
me going to that last day of my thesis, fifth year, and graduating. And I think coming out of that, I was like, all right, now what?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it was 2010, still very much in a recession and trying to figure out what that was going to mean for my career and the industry as a whole. And so I couldn't find a job right away. I moved back to Houston, my hometown, and, was on a journey to try to figure out, am I going to try to give myself some time to try to look for something so I could at least put my degree to use and see maybe where I can find my path in this industry. And I remember I hit the ground running. I started going to AIA events and NOMA events and volunteering for this and maybe having lunch, meetings and informal interviews with folks, and no one was hiring.
Mm.
And then my best friend convinced me to move out to LA because she had recently moved there and was like, all right, you should just come here and like see what's up. And I said, well, I think, maybe 22 or 23 at the time. And she convinced me, and I packed up my little Honda Civic and got on the road. I said, I have nothing to lose. So I drove out to LA and I started looking for jobs. And I always said that, if I just gave myself a few months to see if I could get hired somewhere and then just try it out, see what happens, and hopefully eventually I'll find my path in architecture. So I ended up getting hired a month after moving to LA. And then I didn't realize that 10 years later, I would still be in LA working for a couple of firms out there, working on all kinds of project types, which was really cool. But I think the whole time while I was working, I still had that same feeling of like, what's my path going to be? I tried to study for the exams. I had taken about two or three exams and, it was like failing exam after exam. And then I finally passed one and I got a little bit motivated. And I just had to ask myself, am I doing this for everyone else? As, their expectations of me were as a Black woman in this profession where we are in the extreme minority. We need more Black women licensed architects. Am I doing it for them or am I doing it for me because this is what I really want? And I think there was somewhat of a mental block there that kept me from actually, doing well with these exams. And I think what that was really maybe posing for me, hindsight is 2020, but what I was looking back on was maybe this was a moment in time where I really did need to figure out what I wanted for myself. So I paused. And I think even in that time period, I was still feeling very insecure about my position in architecture because every space that I entered, even with my mentors, the spaces where I found the most community within NOMA, I still hesitated showing up and really being myself because the first question that I always received was, when are you getting your license? And I said, well, I'm just not there yet. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do and where I want to go with this and what my role and my path will be. Oh, well, you can figure that out. Just get your license. And I said, okay, I don't feel like I'm being heard because what I really want is support to help me figure out where I belong and help me figure out what kind of impact that I can make. And ultimately, after some really cool opportunities in the profession and getting to work on some really cool projects, I still really felt this void. And I remember 2019, I had an opportunity to go back to the small firm, the original firm that hired me, which was Hanson LA in Los Angeles. And I was going back in a new role, and it was a director of operations role. And I was excited about it because then that started to kind of open up some doors on the business side of the practice and working to develop the culture of the organization and grow the organization. And I think my interest started to become more people focused and business focused. And although I didn't really get any real training in that area, I thought that that was really sort of where my strengths were starting to show, and was really excited about the opportunities because it was going to be creative and building and, identifying what this role was going to be for us. And I started that job January of 2020. And so,
Oh.
of course, nothing really came to be with what we had hoped for at that given point due to the pandemic. And we all had to, put that sort of emergency hat on and like, what are we going to do to try to retain this team and, make everyone safe and keep our heads above water. And my role just, it never manifested into what I wanted it to be. And quite frankly, at that time, I was very miserable. I was very lonely being stuck in a one bedroom apartment in LA at the time. And I think at that point, I'd probably reached my low of depression and trying to figure out like, I'm trying these things and nothing's working. So what am I going to do? And fortunately, at that time, when I was really committed to doing some work on myself and to figure out what I wanted to do and to pull me out of that low point that I had reached, I had the opportunity to go through a leadership development program. And while I was doing my personal work with therapy and with some other tools that I was exercising to help pull myself out of that time, I had the chance to go through this leadership program, which was, quite focused on the industry. And through that leadership program was to me something that finally provided an opportunity that created the space to kind of blend sort of my personal work that I was doing on myself and my bigger, more value oriented goals for my role in my profession. And it was something that happened to me. I just kind of believe in alignment and, just having these things start to take shape in your life and creating some awareness around these things that we don't often think about in our day to day, that I believed was the thing that sort of set me on the right track to unveiling what my path was going to be, which is ultimately what I am now doing with Leader Flow and my work with people in our industry. So that is the very long, trying to cover all bases journey of architecture, my role, and just kind of how I've navigated it to get me to where I am now.
Wow. Wow. Well, before we jump into talking about leader flow, I want to go
Yeah,
back to your exam process. And I
yeah,
have to say, I admire you for taking a pause because that just the mindset going into those exams. I had so many failures. I also had a moment where I was like, is this even for me? Like, is
yes,
architecture like you have that? These exams test you. And I think I admire you so much for being like, is this for me or is this for everybody else? Because
mhm,
it's a grueling process. It's
it is,
financially, emotionally, mentally, completely draining. And so the
absolutely,
fact that you were able to take a step back and reassess if this was even the right path for you, that takes a lot of confidence in like what your decision will be in the future. Like that takes a lot of just strength as
yeah.
well. So
Yeah, and it's
that's
tough.
huge.
When you're working through a decision like that, you're still very conscious of all of the external like influences and factors
Mm.
that go into that decision, right? Because every time I would tell a friend, family member that I was testing and I'd fail, right? That's a
Yeah.
letdown. That's
Mhm.
we know what that feels like. And so then
Mhm.
to now have it ultimately sort of culminate in my decision to just step back from it altogether is even more of a weighted feeling around that. But it was, in all honesty, in the bigger scheme of things, when I was thinking about what that would really mean for me to take a step back from that. And, my thing is, I'm a person that is a never say never person. It's just that at that time, I think it was very crucial for me to really determine what I wanted to do and make sure that I was in alignment with my wants. and prioritizing that for myself. And, I think when I took a step back, I also realized that where I really want contributions and also just more like transparency and vulnerability to be sort of shared in our industry and the conversations that we have is that there are so many ways that we can contribute to this industry that don't all look the same. And for
Mhm.
me, I still have a connection and interest in, improving the industry and having my contributions show up through the work that I do. And also very much okay and now confident that my contributions will be equally valuable, if not more, although my path is just a little different.
No, absolutely. And it seems like it also set the foundation for just like your journey into helping the community. Like you just said it there yourself. Like, I think without going through that experience yourself and understanding and having to make those decisions, and then also being at such a low point and then bringing yourself up from it and doing the hard work personally, makes you that much more of a leader. And then you're able to understand and connect with people who are struggling through what you went through. And I think
Yeah,
that's also something too that, when people are struggling through something, if you've already been through that, then you have a different sense of empathy for those people. And I think then you can help them in such a better way than if you had this like picture perfect, journey and just like, oh, everything worked out. Well, that's not how life usually is. And so I think that was definitely something you had to experience in order to be able to get to where you are today.
yeah, and I'm so glad you brought that up because, when I talked about my sort of insecurities being in architectural spaces and wanting to sort of like stay in the background or,
Mm,
maybe not insert myself in all of the spaces and conversations, I realized that what resonated with me the most being in spaces where I could hear people's stories or hearing from those who had an alternate path. Maybe
mm,
they did something different and then came back to architecture. And maybe they were, struggling with their role and their path in architecture. And, they decided to leave it for a period of time because they wanted to explore some other interests. And just hearing about their journeys, it was always where like, oh, someone else is thinking like me or like I'm thinking
mhm,
like someone else did. And it wasn't this picture perfect, like, oh, I knew I wanted to be an architect. I knew I wanted to get my license. I knew that this was going to be the path. I took all my tests back to back to back. I failed some, but I
mhm,
I passed others and now I'm licensed. And that was a hard story for me to relate to because I
mhm,
knew that my path was going to be very different. And whether it ended up looking at all like theirs or not, that really wasn't the point. It was just being able to hear that someone else, maybe had some challenges that they had to
mhm,
face that were, not the typical journey that we
mhm.
often hear when we talk about architecture, especially with so much of the focus being on the numbers and,
Yeah.
the few licensed Black women architects that are out there. So I'm very much a champion for it. I'm very much advocating for it. And I am also advocating for, having just the different experiences being added to the conversation so that people can identify and people will feel seen and heard. And hopefully that'll be something that, gives them some comfort and some confidence to, find whatever their contributions will be to our industry as a whole.
No, absolutely. And I think then people will feel less alone as
Yeah,
well. So I think that
exactly.
you're a great example of an alternative route, still
Yeah.
staying in the architecture industry. And now I want to talk about leader flow because listeners should know that you and I actually connected in person at the AWA Plus D event, the symposium back in June, and you were the main speaker and just sharing about leader flow and the collaboration you do. So I want to hear, because I'm also an entrepreneur, I want to ask about the details of starting a non for profit because I think that's
Yes.
really interesting and hearing how that process is. But
Yeah.
also, I want to share with the listeners what is Leader Flow and, what impact it has on the community because it's such a great resource for so many people.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'll start with that piece first. So I was mentioning that I went through a pilot leadership development program in 2021 at this time where I was trying to figure out what was going to be next for me in my career. So the way that that came about was I had been on the SoCal NOMA executive board. That's the National Organization of Minority Architects in Southern California. I had been on that board for about 3.5 years at the time. And we had a lot of attention and what I would like to consider just almost like a spotlight on us following George Floyd's murder and all of the social unrest in our country. And, there appeared to be just a lot of interest in trying to support people of color globally, right? And just in
Mhm.
our industries, what more can we be doing as an industry? And so at the time, I felt like, we were trying to take advantage of having the attention and the awareness on our organization and our mission, which was really, really great. And we had a town hall, virtual town hall, where, some of our members and peers and friends of the organization really got to share about what their experiences have been in the industry and also just where there have been some, missed opportunities, I think. And now that we had the spotlight on us, like, how can we be more intentional in shaping where our industry is going to be headed? And so my now co-founder, John Gavin, he is the CEO of KPFF Engineers, and he's based in Los Angeles. He was actually on that town hall virtual meeting that night. And he realized that he had known some familiar folks through the industry, including our recent past president of SoCal NOMA, Lance Collins. And after hearing, what we were sharing on that town hall, he had this idea to, try to figure out a more tangible way of contributing to our industry and supporting professionals of color. And at the time, him being a CEO, he was asked, just like many other CEOs, to like put something out there, make a statement, let your stance be known that, we don't stand for racism in our country and this is our our position on DEI in our industry. And so he said, he just wouldn't feel comfortable making a statement unless we were going to do something. And that's, his organization. We have to be intentional about it. So he decided to take sort of the framework of a leadership development program that he had co-created within his organization that was primarily focused on gender equity at the time. And they were really trying to find opportunities for advancement of women in their company. And they found a lot of success through that leadership development program. And he introduced the idea of creating a similar framework for SoCal NOMA and wanting it to focus on mid-career professionals of color in our industry. And we would also have a little bit more of a sort of diverse representation lens on it through inviting other industry leaders to participate, help co-facilitate some of the sessions. We wanted to make it more broadly for architecture, engineering, and construction professionals to participate. So I was invited to apply, and I was just about right at my 10-year mark of experience in the industry. So because of everything that I was going through personally, I was like, I think this is maybe an opportunity for people who might be feeling stuck or stagnant and like, what's going to be next? And how do I kind of, re energize myself and try to, unlock the doors to the next chapter of my career and advancement? And so that's how I went through it. And coming out of it, we didn't really know what was going to happen because it was still branded as the SoCal NOMA Leadership Development Program. And being on the board, we also realized that our capacity was maxed for programming because all of our roles were completely volunteer. And so it was going to be hard to try to repeat the program year after year with folks who were already in volunteer positions on the board. And so when John and I stayed in touch throughout the program, he knew where my head was at, some of the things that I was like interested in and focused on for, my next chapter in my career. And he reached out and was like, Janiece, I have a really wild idea. And I said, what? And at this point, mind you, I had just moved back home to Houston. I was starting over, like, did not have a job. I was working some odd end jobs at the time. That's a whole other story for another day. But he reached out and proposed this idea to start a nonprofit. And I said, John, I have no idea how to start a nonprofit. I have no idea about how to run a nonprofit. He said, me neither. He's like, but if we could put our heads together and like work through this together, like I'd be all in. And, if you're all in, like we can hold each other down and like make this thing happen. And also just be able to commit to what it's going to require for this to be really successful. And quite honestly, I sat on it for a day. I thought about it and I just reflected on my experience, and I knew how powerful it was for me to go through it, especially at the time that I was at in my career. And I said, if there was anybody I'd be willing to sort of take the leap of faith with, it would be someone like John, because I know that he's committed. I know that he's invested. I know that he's very genuine about this and making a commitment and an impact in our industry in this way. And so we partnered together and we launched Leader Flow in 2022. And we ran the second year of the program in Los Angeles and kind of realized that, there was almost like a magic to this experience because the formula was working. And we started fundraising and reaching out to different companies to talk about this experience. And it started going really, really well. And so in 2023, I had the opportunity to go full time as the executive director. And we decided to expand the program to Seattle and Houston last year, which was very successful. So we ran the program in all three cities. And we're currently doing the same thing this year in LA, Seattle, and Houston. And we're getting ready to close our program in September. And we're also excited to announce that we are expanding to Chicago and New York in the fall of
Mhm.
this year.
Wow.
So that was sort of how Leader Flow got started. But just to give you a little bit more detail on the program and what it offers, is we have a 7-session leadership program that we offer at no cost to our participants. So we form very small cohorts between 12 and 15 people in each city. There's a quick and very simple application process for those who are interested in sort of taking the next step in their careers. But really, sort of the focus of our curriculum is what we like to look at in sort of 3 phases of a journey. And that journey starts with the first phase of really getting to know yourself better. And we explore topics around like strengths finders. We have a few assessments that we offer to really help people understand, the strengths that they possess, what makes them who they are. And then we also do some workshops around what we like to consider a more deeper personal dive with exploring your personal and professional values and trying to create some more alignment through those values. And also looking at what does it mean to really integrate all of these areas of your life between work, your family, your community, and yourself, right? Like the things that we are constantly trying to figure out how to juggle and balance. But what
Mhm.
does it mean to actually find more alignment and now have more integration in those areas of your life? And then once you get to really discover more about, or at least get reacquainted with the things that make you who you are, then we start to look at how does that show up in how we interact with others. And we explore the topics such as emotional intelligence, crucial conversations, some of the things that don't come as natural to us, especially when our emotions are involved and the
Mhm.
stakes
Mhm.
are high, right?
Yep.
And then the last phase of our program is really focused on the business side of AEC. So we explore project development, relationship development, and client development. And then we go into a little bit more of the business side of the practice with exploring the financial aspects of project and practice leadership and understanding how service based firms like architecture and engineering firms look at finances versus contractors. And then the last piece of this is really kind of helping them to develop their overall personal leadership philosophy and how can they sort of exercise that leadership philosophy at whatever stage of career they're in. So the curriculum is really focused on empowering people in our industry to feel the confidence that they need to navigate their career paths and really, kind of kick this into a new gear for them, considering that they've already had some experience in their profession, but now this is an opportunity to kind of kick it into the next gear. So that's a little bit of the framework of the program and what we offer.
As you were describing it, it kind of sounded like your journey in a way, like to go back to like you start with the personal. So I just saw so many like very similarities with it, but it sounds like an incredible program. And I think,
Yeah.
thinking about the Women in Architecture series theme this year, collaboration. And that's why I
Mm,
wanted you to start off the series because you do have this collaboration within the AEC industry and
yes.
just the individuals and now all across the country, because I think sometimes in architecture, we are a collaborative industry. We are working with
Mhm.
consultants and you're working with clients and contractors and subcontractors and all that collaboration. But then also collaborating in not just a like project to project, but
Yeah.
also learning from each other in leadership roles. And I think that is really important. And that's something when we first started this call, we kind of talked about we had met at AWA plus D, and during that, symposium, the energy was like, oh my gosh, let's all reconnect. And after this, and let's all, and then sometimes like after the following day, you kind of just forget. And then, weeks go by and we're like, oh my gosh, it seems like it's been, almost 2 months since we've seen each other. And it seems like much longer time. But it's that remembering to kind of still stay connected and don't forget the connections that you make, because I think anybody who joins the Leader Flow program will
Mm,
make connections within their cohort that will then help them further down the line in other phases of their journey, and whatever things
yeah.
come up throughout different chapters and seasons of life. And I think having just that foundation too is just so beneficial, and being collaborative in that way. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, it is. And, it's definitely something that we are trying to be more focused on, like the more that we're rolling our program out and building our alumni network, because we don't want the program to just be sort of a one time opportunity
Hmm.
and then you kind of go back into your routine. Like what you just
Yeah.
described with the symposiums and like conferences, we get all energized and then we get back into sort of our day to day, right?
Hmm.
But we really want to build out a network because a lot of what we do in our industry is so collaborative. And these are the things that, we recognize. It shows up in our day-to-day practice on projects, but a lot of the shared experiences between people and especially people of color in our industry, where oftentimes we are either the only one or, the very few in the room, is that there is a lot of relatability there. And so how
Hmm.
can we now start to build out the Leader Flow community in a way that people will feel supported in their cities and outside of just the organizations that they are, currently working for. And so, I think what it requires, at least what I'm learning through this experience, is, we're building sort of this network of collaboration amongst our sponsoring firms who are representing architecture, engineering, and construction companies, but also, trying to lean into the partnerships with organizations who are very much, believing in the same things. And, we're oftentimes trying to do a lot of similar work and, trying to be more, I guess, collaborative in a way that, makes it more attainable for our members to feel like they have the space and capacity to show up and not have to reinvent the wheel for every initiative that we're trying to create within our organizations. And so
Hmm.
I think that's the piece that I'm much more drawn to, is because I've been on both sides of it now, where, I've been a part of NOMA's board in SoCal, and, just recognizing that there's so many of our organizations out there that believe in supporting, our industry in so many ways. And so how can we be more, vocal and collaborative about what each organization is doing and how we can support without feeling like we are, sort of expanding or pushing the capacity for our volunteers who are already doing so much in their roles, but we could share the load, I think,
Hmm.
across our organizations, which is something that's of interest to me. So it's definitely something I want to continue to like keep the conversation going. Like I know that's what we talked about in the beginning, Katerina, was just like,
Hmm.
how do we keep this going? Because it's really
Hmm.
hard to do this, and we recognize that. And the thing that I'm more mindful of these days is, now that my work is full time on Leader Flow, which it does require a lot of time and energy to do things like this, and this is my full time now. What does it look like, for those who are still working full time architecture
Hmm.
jobs and are doing a lot of these initiatives and organizations on the side? And how do we now try to share the load in those capacities as well? So it's definitely a big, challenge. And I know it's going to take time to sort of figure out the right way and how we do that across various organizations. But I'm really hopeful that the more that we talk about these and the more that we network and meet each other who are doing the work, that we'll find the opportunities to do so.
No, I think so. I think it's exactly what you just described, and it's reconnecting and, yeah, just staying connected and just building that foundation of relationships in the different organizations. And I know during the conference at AWA plus D, that's exactly what we were talking about, is so many of the organizations have the same mindset. They want to do the same thing. They're doing the similar events. Why not bring the resources together? And I think that's so
Right.
important. And that's that collaboration.
Exactly. I mean, it's so necessary. I mean, like even thinking about our expansion, to other cities and,
Hmm.
a lot of our organizations that do have more of a national presence and getting involved with the local chapters, like it's definitely been a part of my outreach and just letting, organizations know that like Leader Flow is coming and, we could use their support in cross promoting, events and activities. And, I think at the core foundation of it all, it's like all of our organizations are doing the work for our members, right? Those who are involved with the programs. And I think this is an opportunity to just showcase that, it's like the rising tide lifts all boats concept, right? If we can all
Hmm.
lean in and continue to provide opportunities through the connection of our organizations, then there'll definitely be a lot more, I think, sustainability in the work that we're doing over time.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Janiece, thank you so much for taking the time to come on From the Honeycomb, share your story, share about leader flow. I have really enjoyed our conversation and just hearing you talk about what you've gone through and how your journey impacted what you do now and how you're helping others. And it's very inspiring. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. I'm so glad we were able to do this. And, I always appreciate the opportunity to just dialogue. And I'm so
Mhm.
glad that we had the opportunity to meet and talk more about this. And I feel very inspired about collaborations to come and any way that
Yeah.
I can support you and the work that you're doing and the platform that you have. I definitely want to make myself available to do that because I'm really inspired by all of the work that you've done.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, of course. We have to like continue supporting and lifting each other up. Like it's a tough
Yeah.
world out there and
Mhm.
trying to stay motivated through, entrepreneurship and
Mhm.
like, trying to figure it out as we go and get the help that we need and asking for the help when we need it. All
Mhm.
of those things are such a challenge. And, I just want to make sure that the more that we can support one another and be vocal about that and just lift each other up, that's something that I am very much intentional about in my day to day because we all need it.
Mhm. No, absolutely. And where can listeners find you?
Sure. So definitely look us up on our LinkedIn page. It's just
Mhm.
Leader Flow. It's very easy to find. That's LEADERFLOW. And our Instagram page is _Leader Flow. And super excited to welcome people who are interested in learning more about our organization, our program. We are always looking for more sponsors, more people to get involved as guest facilitators for our cohorts, and hosting our workshops in the cities that we're in. There's plenty of opportunities to get involved with us. So if you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to me directly, Janiece@leaderflow.org.
Perfect. I will provide link in the show notes. Janiece, thank you so much.
Thank you, Katerina. I enjoyed it.
Me too. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of From the Honeycomb podcast. As we conclude, I want to express my gratitude for joining me in today's episode. I hope you have found it insightful and inspiring. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate, review, and click that like button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to share this with your friends. You can follow me on Instagram at From the Honeycomb Podcast, and you can also further your support of From the Honeycomb by visiting the Patreon link provided in the show notes. Your contribution helps make more episodes possible. And lastly, don't forget to subscribe to my monthly newsletter, A Spark of Positive Energy, that comes out on the 7th of each month. Thank you so much, and see you next Friday.